Rayesa and Kathryn. I don't know why we're starting with the laughing. It's not a funny topic, but
Probably because we're both in green.
that's what it is. It's a funny color.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway, today's topic is self-fulfilling prophecies, or we just fear it into happening. So I guess we want to just
Mhm.
challenge the whole concept of self-fulfilling prophecies and what is our role in it. And I think the clue is that what do they say? There's a saying, something about what you focus on grows, or there's
Yeah, what you focus on grows.
mm,
And there is some other saying that says what you fear. I know from experience that your greatest fears become your greatest tests. So you're fearing
mm,
something, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to send you the corresponding test that you need to stop fearing that and to come back to Him. And because He's the only one that's meant to be feared.
ooh, juicy way to start the conversation. And of
Yeah.
course, our topic, unoppressed, in general, is about self-oppression and overcoming self-oppression. It's not about others oppressing us. And the biggest self-oppression is when we're taking ourself away from Allah. And what you just described is one of those scenarios, isn't it? Where we're fearing other than Allah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I learned that from experience. From I could some like big tests that I had. I think it was around money. It was around money, and it was around risk, and it was around losing a certain amount of money, and that was a test I got. Like I had to go through the test that required a higher level of tawakkul for me so I can get through the test, whether that amount of money went away or it didn't,
Hmm.
that I would be okay. And at the end of the day, it did go away. But what I gained, because I didn't buy into, yes, I was afraid. I did have fears around it. But and getting the support, I think I was working with you at that time too, getting the support from you and helping me to see that the fears were just my insecure thinking.
Mm.
And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was trying to show me something. He was trying to show me, am I relying on that number, that amount, that dollar amount, the that that amount of money, or am I relying on Him?
Mm.
Meaning, was I confusing the means and the source? And what was I relying on, the means, or was I relying on the source? And so that's what I gained out of that, because I didn't end up buying into the fear and thinking that it's the end for me. Like I'm not going to be okay, because we go down these dark holes of like it's the end of the world. Oh my God, how am I going to survive? I'm going to be homeless. All of this, you know, fearful, insecure, crazy thinking comes up in our mind. And even if it does happen, like in my situation, even though it did happen, it wasn't a bad thing. It wasn't like the end of the world like I was thinking it was. There was something to learn, and there was growth for me. And I think that we can apply that in any scenario, any situation.
Yes, and it's forgetting who the actual provider is in that particular scenario. We get
Mm.
caught up in seeing something of this dunya being our provider, whether it's a job, whether it's a person, whether it's a business. But as you were saying, Allah is the provider, and He's the one that has the plan.
Mm. Mm.
So you were saying something, because we are having a chat before we began about what is self-fulfilling prophecy, and the connection with fear. And you mentioned that when we get focused in on something, it's usually when we're talking about this sort of thing, it's usually something bad that we're anticipating. We
Yeah.
start trying to control things to prevent that
Mm.
happening, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Because we're feeling like if we're in a state of fear, that means we're having fearful thinking, or we're just having insecure thinking, right? We're feeling insecure. So in those states, we compensate by trying to control things so they don't go the way we don't want it to go. And we start doing things to make sure that that outcome doesn't happen. And we teach about this a lot, right? About going into outcome thinking, going into the future, and oh, I don't want this to happen. And if I do this now, this won't happen. I'll do this now, so that won't happen. Like we know what's going to happen in the future, right? We act like we do. And then we start trying to control people, like their behavior and their actions. And that makes people feel suffocated, and stifled. So that takes people farther away from you. It pushes them farther away from you. Whether it's a person or whether it's a situation that you're trying to avoid, you're trying to do anything that you can to avoid having that situation.
And what we tend to do is actually push everybody towards exactly what we're fearing. And so it looks like a self-fulfilling prophecy, like we've prophesied that this is going to happen, and then we've done everything in our power to prevent it happening, and it happened anyway, not appreciating that our focus and fear around it has altered the way we're showing up. So we've actually been contributing to it going down that path.
Yeah. Yeah, because we're showing up as if it's going to happen. We're expecting it to happen. We're anticipating it's going to happen, and we're trying to stop it. So we're showing up with that energy. And when you show up with that energy, that's what you attract.
We want to make sure, because when we talk about like that's what we attract, we don't want to sound like some of the personal development stuff out there. We want to keep it on Islamic terms, but the way I would see that from an Islamic perspective is we've chosen a path of not trusting that Allah is the one that is in control. So we're trying to control. And so it's not so much we're attracting it, more we're attracting a lesson from Allah, because what happens, if we're going to fear other than Allah, if we're going to go off the straight path, what are we going to get? A test that is going to be for us, whether we come back onto the straight path or continue on our own journey. And like you began the whole session with, fearing other than Allah.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because when we stop trusting that Allah is in control of the outcome and He has the best plan, and our job is to surrender to however way things play out, and show up with that wisdom of what is Allah looking for me to do in this moment. How am I meant to respond in a way that's pleasing to Allah in this moment, rather than, oh, I can't let this happen, so I'm going to do this, this, and this.
And the reality is, maybe it's meant to happen anyway, because maybe that's part of our qadr, and maybe that's part of our test. And instead of being present in the moment and showing up with ihsan in the moment, instead we're showing up in fear, trying to prevent something that may be inevitable, or alternatively may not be inevitable, if we're focused on showing up in the right way, or in the best way. Let's not go right and wrong, let's go best way, ihsan, the way that's most pleasing to Allah. Because obviously all of this is life lessons, all of this is growth. Every time, I don't even want to say we make a mistake, because it's not so much about making a mistake, it's about, well, we go off track, we start thinking outside of that Allah is the one in charge, it's Allah's plan that will prevail, and start thinking that we have to do something to prevent a certain outcome.
You start competing with Allah, right?
It kind of, which is a very not clever thing to do, hey? So it makes sense that the outcome may well end up eventuating as part of our lesson. When
You made a really good point about maybe whatever thing you're fearing is meant to happen in some way or fashion, in some fashion. And that's a really hard thing for people to accept because we're so focused and stuck on how we think things should be, things should go, how our journey should be, how our children's journey should be. You know, we're so focused on that because we want them to be a certain way, we want them to experience life in a certain way, but we can't. We can't, because they're different people, and Allah has a plan for them just as He has like for us. And the hardest thing is to surrender, surrendering and to what does Allah want me to experience in this journey or in this test, rather than I need to have this outcome. And that's, I feel like, is the most challenging. I mean, if anyone's listening and watching, what do you think? Do you feel like that's what I see is the most challenging, difficult thing to do, is to surrender to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's plan, and allow it to unfold, even though it's things that you fear?
It'd be good to unpack an example here, I think, because we've been talking kind of in general and not in specifics. But you brought up, the idea of how our children's journey should go. I think there's some key fears that parents have. One is children leaving Islam, not being on the deen.
Yeah.
I think at the moment, another one is them being influenced by the LGBTQI plus. I think I got the letters right for the first time. ABCXYZ. I had a few more letters.
Yeah.
I don't mean
because it's a hard campaign that's going strong, right? And so how could they not be influenced, right?
So let's talk how either of those scenarios, because both of those scenarios I think would scare Muslim parents, right?
Yeah, it's scary to me. I mean,
how, if we are focused on that, how that could actually work against us, as opposed to having to tawakkul, trusting in Allah and showing up with ihsan. So if we are focused on that outcome, I think the first thing that happens is we notice every single little thing that our child does that verifies that they're going down that path. That's the first thing. So little things that maybe normally wouldn't have any meaning, suddenly we've created a story around them that it's evidence to support that we should be worried about it. I think that's the first step, isn't it?
Yeah, because our brain is verifying the belief or the fear that it has, the thinking that it has. See, I knew it. See, this is what's happening.
I need to be worried about this. So
I got to do something now. I got to take control.
Yeah, and it might be something as simple as our child asks a question about either of those topics, like even, because they especially...
Or defends, or even if they defend, like, they may have friends who, align with that, or people that they know, and they start defending them or be like, that's not right. And then it triggers something within you and you get more fearful. And then you respond in a way that defensive or argumentative, and that just pushes them farther away and makes them believe that you're crazy and the other person is being oppressed.
Yeah. And so the controlling part then becomes like trying to control their social life or control their friendships. Now, we're not saying...
You can control their thinking.
Yeah, or control their thinking. Yeah, even to that degree. We're not saying, by the way, that you become complacent and just allow our kids to be influenced in ways that it's unhealthy. But we have to do this in a mindful manner. And the mindful manner is we take the outcome out of our head. Like the self-fulfilling prophecy thing, the key problem in it is always having this outcome in your head of how it's going to turn out if I don't fix this, or if I don't. So we get out of that mode and it becomes, in this moment, what needs to happen in this moment. And so it becomes just about this conversation. And so this conversation isn't about a stepping stone to something else. It's about, we're having this conversation right now. And maybe the conversation might be that our kids are young, they've bought into a little bit of the rhetoric that they've heard out there, and they're asking the question, oh, innocently, what's wrong with someone who's the same sex loving somebody else, right?
Yeah,
And that's a
actually it's
good,
great.
curious and innocent question.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on their age, the innocence of that question, in their mind, the love they're talking about could be like that friendship that they have with their girlfriends.
Yeah, because
Or
at their age, they don't see anything wrong with love. Love is a good thing, right?
yeah,
So they're not.
but our mind, we're
Yeah,
thinking from an adult perspective, and we jump straight in on it.
yeah,
Islam says, and Allah tells us, and la 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 la, right? And
yeah.
what are we doing in that moment? We are making, first of all, our beautiful deen seem like something harsh, especially if you think that they may not even be comprehending this rhetoric of loving one another at the an adult level. They're still understanding it at a child level. So they're thinking, wow, you mean I'm not allowed to have friends? Like you just don't understand how they may
Yeah.
be interpreting it. So the problem starts with us leaping in and talking first. The most fruitful way forward is actually to stop and listen and actually hear what it is that they're understanding, hear what it is
Mm-hmm.
that they're seeing, and then perhaps realizing, oh, well, most of it's innocent, there's nothing to worry about. And then you can just have a gentle conversation about, well, you know what you're talking about, that's fine. But
Yeah.
as people get older, then relationships are different, and you can have this gentle lead into how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set things out in a particular way in order for us to have healthy families, healthy communities, and come from this very positive, reinforcing, beautiful way instead of this fearful, controlling way. And so we still end up with the same message to them, but the manner in which it's delivered makes so much difference. And the more we come in harsh and fearful, the more we push them away from Islam, because they start to think, well, this is harsh, this is hard, this is, where's the caring and compassion for one another as human beings in there?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I heard you say is to just listen, because
Mm.
sometimes we get in the frenzy and we start freaking out like, oh my God, they said that word, they're talking about it now, they're exposed to it now. And this whole story gets generated in your mind of how they're gonna turn out, how it's gonna turn out, and everything, all this future outcome thinking, that we lose our bearings and we can't listen to hear what is it that they're really saying, what's going on for them. And without that level of listening and understanding, you won't be able to respond with ihsan. You won't be able to respond with your wisdom in the right way. I mean, the best way. Rather, you'll just be freaked out, fearful, and want to shut it down right away. And that will shut the child down, actually. And they won't feel safe to trust you with this type of issue or this topic. They're like, oh, well, she just gets really angry and frustrated, and it makes her mad. So I'm not even going to approach it with her. And then that's not what we want. We want them to feel safe and comfortable to approach us with all of these topics, because we want to be the ones to influence them rather than them being influenced, from the outside world.
Which in turn actually then just opens the door for that self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because when you then have the breakdown in the relationship, then there's a greater opportunity for them to be influenced in the ways that we're most freaking out about them being influenced.
Yeah.
Mm.
Makes sense. Somebody said in the chat, in the comments, stepping on fear is a first step towards growth. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
just a Facebook user for whoever's sharing with us. So sorry if we're not responding to you personally, because it doesn't tell us who it is that's commenting. But wa alaikum assalam. We've got a few on here, so we would love to see your thoughts, takeaways, questions around this topic. It's Aisha. Alhamdulillah. Good to have you here. Yeah, she says observation, evidence, story, and domino effect, and then boom.
That's true. You have two egos, explosion of two egos, right?
Yeah. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. The other thing I think it's really important to mention, especially because we sort of got into the topic of parenting, probably because I guess that's an area that we see it coming out in many of our families of great concern, is it's never too late to focus back in on the relationship with your child and take a different pathway. And it's also be kind to yourself when you have those moments when you lose sight of it and you do end up trying to control things or make things happen in a way that maybe not with ihsan, because we are all human. Just reflecting on my own behavior today, to be honest, I had a challenging time myself today. And so this topic is as much a reminder for us as it is for anyone else that Allah is the one that is in control. But sometimes it just looks like we have to step in. And it's true, we do, but not from a place of fear.
Yeah, I know. We have those moments, and that's because we're human, that we get upset or we get frustrated or we freak out. But I love how you said that it's never too late. It's never too late to build back that trust and that safety and that connection, by having the shifts within yourself and showing up differently in the relationship, that you can offer something different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wonder if there's any other comments, but I think that was a good way to tie it together, in terms of how buying into our fears and believing those stories allow us to basically create the scenario that we are fearing to begin with, and even if things happen that we fear, it's a reminder that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never send us more than we can handle. And it's our opportunity to deal with the fear with that level of taqwa and tawakkul, knowing that He's there with you. Like He's sent you this test, and the solution is to go back to Him so you can, grow in your taqwa and your tawakkul to and get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah. Tawakkul is the key. Tawakkul is the key. And we all have moments where we lose that. I mean, this is part of the test of this dunya. I think that the tawakkul is the key to the whole topic of self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it?
Yeah, but we really need to be in that grounded state, feeling secure in ourselves because we have Allah on our side. Because this person left a comment here, loving the topic. I can relate so many things. Recently, my daughter asked me why that man with the beard is wearing makeup and nail paint, and I was like lost and frozen. Seriously, it was ecstatic in my head, right? Because this topic can be shocking, right? And the more we can get that groundedness and that security within ourselves, that like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put us in these times for a reason, right? And so He knows that we can handle it, and this is our test, and that just means that we need to go back and ground ourselves and get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in order to deal with the things that we have to deal with in our era, in our time.
Actually, saw someone who's written a book that addresses this topic for Muslims with their kids. And so what I loved about this book was it was all about how people sometimes love to dress up, and this kid, just because he wears his Spider-Man outfit doesn't mean he can really spread webs from his hands, like Spider-Man. And what it was basically pointing to was we are who we are. We can dress up however we like, but it doesn't change who we are. And I think that's a beautiful way of tackling it when you see sorry about the coughing. The question that the daughter was asking about the man with the beard wearing makeup and nail paint is, well, just people like to dress up sometimes, and that's their choice, and that's okay for them. Doesn't change who they are. And
yeah.
sorry, the more I talk, the more it triggers the tickle in the throat.
Oh.
But I think that's where what I see happening is, and this is where the tawakkul comes in, is there's some beautiful resources now coming out to have these conversations.
Yeah.
So we don't have to panic. Just have trust that what resources we need will come to us when we need them. And that when our children ask us questions that are curly, is to just stop and breathe. Don't respond straight away.
That's what somebody put here as a good takeaway. Just pause and observe. It is what it is. My story created by my thought. And of course, like Sister Isa said, Allah will guide us. It's Aisha. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you find these sessions calming and powerful and beneficial. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, so somebody appreciates your answer. I think it was, maybe it was Aisha or someone else who put that comment. She appreciates your answer on how to respond to her daughter.
Well, it wasn't mine. It was coming from this book. And it was just beautifully written in a very simple form that just made it non-judgmental. And just like, there are so many people out there. For instance, we'll find people that are covered in tattoos. And of course, in Islam, we're not meant to tattoo our body either. There's so much out there that is different to our practice in Islam. And instead of being judgmental about it, we can just go, look, that's their choices. That's different. Allah has said for us this way. That's our choices, and it's different. And different is fine. It's okay. And just take the judgment out of it. It takes the curiosity out of it, because the other thing is, as soon as you make something forbidden, or then they get more curious, they want to understand, and they'll dive into it more. Again, the self-fulfilling prophecy type thing. Trust that if you can just make it, everyone's different, everyone makes different choices. That's a part of this test. And Allah gives us all these tests. He says, this is the way I expect you to live. And then you're given all these choices of how you can live. And it's up to you to choose to live your life the way that's pleasing to Allah, or some other way. And what are you going to choose? And bring it back in a really beautiful, calm way, so that they can see it's not about being restricted. It's about being offered the opportunity to live a good life, or to have the freedom to live whatever life you want. But if it's not in the way Allah has suggested, be prepared that
consequences.
There'll be consequences related to that.
Yeah, that's why I tell my daughter, it's like, you can do whatever you want, as long as you're willing to own it and face the consequences, because every choice has consequences. You know, and you can do whatever you want as long as you're not displeasing Allah. But if you choose to displease Allah, there's going to be consequences for that too.
That's right. And we've witnessed that in our own selves over and over again. When we choose our own way over Allah's way, we notice.
We feel it. We feel it. Come back here.
Alhamdulillah for that, because the other side is, if you make those choices and there aren't consequences in this dunya, it means Allah's saving the consequences for us in the hereafter, and we do not want them then. I'd much rather the test now and the opportunity now to come back to this.
And that goes back to what you were saying, that sometimes these things that we're fearing may need to happen in order for someone to come back stronger and more secure in their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that will help them in the rest of this life and then to get to the next life. And we don't get to decide that for ourselves or other people, right? Allah is the one who has the wisdom and does all the planning of who gets what. Like, we get what we need, not what we think we want, or So I love what you said earlier too about like making things positive, because like when you tell a child don't run, they run. But if you tell them walk, right, then they'll walk. But when you tell them don't do something, they just do it. They keep doing it. It doesn't register.
Yes. And you can do that when you're in your wisdom, when you're not focused on worrying about an outcome. When we're focused on worrying about an outcome, which is the whole self-fulfilling prophecy thing that we started with, we lose that ability to be wise in how we deal with the situation. So, alhamdulillah, I think if anyone is listening to the recording of this, please feel free to share a takeaway from this. And if there are any questions, inshallah, we can come back and answer them. We'll keep our eyes open for a while to see if anyone has any questions. But it might be a good moment to wrap it up, I feel.
Yeah, I think we went into different directions and we went deeper into this. And I hope that was beneficial for all those that are listening, and you have something positive that you took away from it.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair for being here with us, and look forward to seeing you next month with our next Unoppressed with Rayesa and Kathryn, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum.